Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So I have an interesting video today. I'm going to be rating all of my Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadow palettes from worst to best. I saw this video from Paige Corin, so I'll link her video down below. I don't know who first started it, but so I have 5 palettes. I'm gonna rank them from 5 to 1 being the best. Okay, starting off with number 5, which is the worst one, and that would be the Sultry palette. Let me just start by saying that this is probably my favorite packaging out of all of the ABH eyeshadow palettes I have. So this palette is definitely more cool toned than warm toned. So the quality of this palette is great. That's not why I'm ranking it the worst. The reason I rank it the worst is because I find that I don't reach for this palette as much as I do my other palettes. I feel like it's a good beginner friendly cool tone palette. I just don't reach for cool tone eyeshadows as much as I do neutral or warm toned. Okay, number 4 in the ranking. This was a difficult decision because I didn't want this to be the 4th one. It's just the OG. 4th is the Modern Renaissance palette. This is what really got me into Anastasia products, but not only that, I feel like this was the palette that really set off a lot of people's interest in makeup and beauty. I'd say this was probably almost as popular as the Urban Decay Naked palette. So the reason why I'm ranking this number 4, I just don't reach for it as much. I guess just with all these palettes coming out, I don't know if I'd say innovative, but just have more color combinations and different formulas. So this palette has all matte shades, except for this row, there are 2 shimmer shades. But yeah, again, I just find myself reaching for different eyeshadow palettes. But that doesn't mean that every single person shouldn't have this palette. I think this is such a staple palette in anyone's makeup collection. Just one of those palettes that have kind of slipped my mind a bit, you know? So that's why it is number 4. All right, palette number 3. The Omri palette. So I did a review on this not that long ago. I mean, it's somewhat of a new palette. So I'll first say that I love the packaging. I think the whole aesthetic of this palette is very much Omri. So here are the shades. This actually was the first palette. They added 2 more shades too. So you can see. Overall, I did really enjoy this palette. I really like the colors. I don't think they're anything out of the ordinary, but I like the different textures and the different colors in here. It's not your typical warm toned eyeshadow palette. So the majority of this palette is shimmer shades. So basically this whole top row is shimmers, and then these 2 right here. And you just have these as matte shades. So I really like the ratio between mattes and shimmers because I do feel like some brands just put way more matte shades than shimmer shades. So the reason I put this palette as my 3rd is because of the glitter formula in this palette. So this is a pressed glitter formula. It was a new formula for ABH. So here's one of the shades and here's the other shade. So my problem with these is not totally the formula of them, but how they were portrayed. So basically they said with the pressed glitter formula is that you don't need any sort of glitter glue, and you don't even need to wet your brush. They said you can go in with a dry brush or your finger. I just don't feel like that method really worked with this formula. Now, there's no problem with putting pressed glitter in an eyeshadow palette. For example, Huda Beauty has pressed glitters in some of her eyeshadow palettes, but she states that you do need some sort of glitter glue. So that was really the main problem with this. I used the glitter and there was some fallout, but I compared it to the Tati Beauty pressed glitter formula, and this formula is definitely just less pigmented. It's a little more crumbly, which just tells me that you probably need some sort of glue with it. So that was the main thing that I didn't like about this palette. You can still definitely work with the formula, but I don't think it works very well just with your finger or with a dry brush. Okay, that is the Omri palette. So palette number 2 is the Carly Bible palette. This palette released December 2019, so it's relatively new. I do think this is cool packaging. These little like circles are kind of raised, so it gives it some texture. Anyway, here are the shades. So a big reason that this is like my number 2 palette is honestly just because I really like the colors in this palette. I just think it's a really great color story. Obviously there's some neutrals in there, but there's also colors that I don't really have in other palettes. These kind of like blue gray shades are kind of cool, and I also like how these shades are a little bit more like on the cool tone side and these are warm toned. So I like that because you can do a cooler tone look, you can do a warm tone look, but you can also like mix and match all these colors. They work really well together. I also love this shade right here. It's like a warm burnt red. So yeah, overall I just really like the colors of this palette. I think it performed well. I think it's a little bit different than other palettes that I have or other palettes that ABH has come out with. It can still work for everyone. Like there's not too crazy of colors in this palette. So yeah, really love this palette. And now my number 1 eyeshadow palette. This is the best of the best. This is the best eyeshadow palette that ABH has made ever, in my opinion, but also it's the best. So the best palette is Soft Glam. I'm gonna have to say it because we all know this is the best of the best. This palette is so gorgeous. Like this palette would look good on absolutely anyone. So let's do a little close-up of the shades. Like this is literally a piece of art. So you can obviously tell this is a very warm toned eyeshadow palette. This palette has 5 shimmer shades and the rest are mattes. Here are the 2 shimmer shades, kind of similar to the Modern Renaissance, but then you have 3 shades up here. This palette to me is not boring whatsoever. There are definitely a lot of eyeshadow palettes on the market that are very like neutral, warm toned, but they're boring. You don't find yourself like reaching for it because it's not like super exciting. So I love the colors in this because not just all like warm brown tone eyeshadows. So of course you have some nice transition crease shades. You have 3 different sort of brown tone matte shades. Then you have a deeper, really like nice rich brown. There's a black in this palette. You have this really pretty like rustic red shade, and it just fits with the overall like aesthetic of the palette. But then you have these like purple shades throughout the eyeshadow palette. So here's the shade Dusty Rose. Then you have these 2 shimmer shades, one more pink and one a little bit more like mauve toned. And then there's this beautiful bronzy gold shade. I just love it. I love every single color. You can use every single color in this palette. I find with a lot of eyeshadow palettes, there's like those few shades that you just know you're never gonna use them. And I find that with any of these shades, I want to use all of them. So that's why this is the best. So those were all of my eyeshadow palettes. Keep it up, ABH. Try to revise the pressed glitter formula a little bit. So anyway, I'm like sweating so badly. Okay, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. This palette is just like